Hey everyone, welcome back to Keto and Crime. Today we're starting week 4 with day 19 of the Vallow trial. This is Monday, so yesterday's testimony. Just quick administrative duties here. I'm Keto and Crime. I do true crime, horror and sci-fi movie and television reviews, and dark history. I also update the tree with every holiday. I am behind a holiday. It will happen. Thank you so much if you're just finding me. I hope I earned your subscription. And if you are back for your second, third, or even 100 millionth time, I truly, truly, truly appreciate it. And with that being said, let's dive in. First witness that is being called is 𝗙𝗍𝗄𝗏. She is senior DNA analyst at Bode Technology in Virginia, being questioned by Rob Wood. She begins by explaining her educational background and the training she's received for her job. She has processed thousands of DNA samples as an analyst and has participated 20 times in proficiency testing. She has been performing DNA testing since it was officially established for law enforcement in 1995. Wood asks her to briefly describe DNA. She's basically said it's the biological material that makes each person unique, and it's found in almost every cell of your body. You get half of the DNA from your mom, half from your dad. 99% of the DNA, 99% of DNA is the same among individuals, but 1% is unique among individuals, and that's the 1% is what they're looking for. What separates you from another human. He then goes through and kind of talks about the processes, the control groups, the chemicals, everything they use to test DNA. And it is noted that the defense is looking over his reports at the time. I would hope they have looked it over prior as well. He said in May of 2022, or she received 3 DNA profiles from Lori Vallow, Lori Vallow, Daybell, 𝗙𝗍𝗶𝗆, Ryan, Melanie Gibbs. She also received a lot of evidence, including hair attached to adhesive. So she began the testing. She said they tried to focus on the hair. They put it through several washings to get rid of any DNA that was put on to it by virtue of other people passing over, to kind of prevent contamination. They added all the chemicals. It went through heat and cool samples, and they determined how much DNA was in the sample and then made lots and lots of copies of this DNA. She said the partial DNA profile matched the DNA profile provided from Lori Vallow Daybell, and Coleman says that the probability of randomly selecting a random individual in relation to that profile is 1 to 71 billion, that the hair that was found was Lori Vallow. So this is hair that I believe was found on the bodies. So there had been of course, some contact between the children and their mother at this time. Wood has no further questions, and John Thomas will cross-examine. Of course, he's going to question her on her educational backgrounds and the standards that are followed, and I'm sure question her about why that ice cream machine was broken when she had a summer job in 1988 at McDonald's, because that would affect her ability to do a DNA analysis in May of 2021. So, yeah. That post-mix is rough, y'all. So, basically, he just reiterated that she is saying that without a doubt, that it's a 1 in 71 billion chance that it was not Lori's hair stuck on that piece of tape from JJ's body, and that's exactly what she confirms. She also goes through all her standards and why it's labeled that way. And then she talked about some of the DNAs that she tested that really gave them inconclusive results, and he pushes back and points out, gee, that's a lot, trying to infer that all of her findings are butkus. They go through some more questioning about, the human genome, the National Human Genome Research Project, and where DNA standards come from, and then he finally tenders the witness. Coleman does have some is redirected by Rob Wood, who asks if the hair was tested against known profiles, And Coleman reiterates it was tested against the 3 known ones, 𝗙lie, Melanie Gibb, and Lori, and it confirmed without a doubt it was Lori, and then Wood and her just reconfirm everything that was done in the test and why it's up to proper standards, and that there's a 1 in 71 billion chance that it's not Lori, so very, very slim. And then she is then dismissed from the stand. And then there's a short recess as the lawyers and the judge discuss some administrative things going on. When they come back from the recess, Rick Wright, who is a contract special investigator for the FBI, with Lindsay Blake questioning him. He worked for the FBI for 24 years before becoming a contract special investigator. So this is a former FBI agent that is now a gun for hire that the FBI uses from time to time. So he was also in the violent crimes unit against children while he was with the FBI. So he has a huge amount of experience in investigating missing children and child murder cases. He said that initially when he was brought in to investigate the disappearance of J.J. Vallow in November of 2019, he was contracted by Rexburg Police and the FBI, and he only knew J.J. was missing. He did not know yet that murder was suspected or that death was suspected, and he became the case manager on the FBI's case. He said that fairly early on, they determined that 𝗙lie Ryan could not be located, and they got some initial details from both Rexburg and Arizona PD, as well as the Fremont County Sheriffs. He said that they were also probing the death of Tammy Daybell, and Chandler Police were looking into the death of Charles Vallow, while Gilbert Police were looking into the attempted shooting of Brandon Boudreaux. So he pulled all of this together and basically put together a profile. He said he began by questioning Ian Pawlowski, husband of Melanie Pawlowski, and he says that he did question him and became even more concerned for the children's well-being after that conversation when he heard about the group's beliefs. He said that he did record some of the conversations, and he also recorded some that he had had with Melanie P., Lori, Alex, and Chad. A PowerPoint that was a subject of the earlier sidebar is then allowed to be shown, and it was created by Agent Wright. And so they go through the PowerPoint. The first slide says Alex Cox with the Homer J. Maximus at Gmail with his phone number. So this is a phone number and Gmail tied to Alex Cox. He kind of follows through. He says Alex started residing in Idaho the evening of September 1st, and based on his cell phone data, he moved to St. George, Utah, to Rexburg the evening of the 1st, and the device began to spend its evenings at the Pioneer Road apartment, so establishing that he was indeed living in Rexburg. And then beginning September 5th, that device was tracked to another unit in the complex. The next slide shows Alex's travel activity at Yellowstone on September 8th, which of course is the last photo of either child and the last time 𝗙lie was seen alive. He points out that all the data comes from GPS, Wi-Fi, cell phone tower data, and that it was all compiled together, so each data point was looked at individually. It's not like they just pulled one grad scheme. They looked at each individual ping separately. He says that Alex's device left Rexburg at 11:32 on September 8th, and he began to see little breadcrumbs fall when he went to Yellowstone. He saw it ping near 𝗪𝗡 and then eventually leave the park just before 7 p.m. that evening. He says there were stops around 𝗪𝗡, a cafeteria, and then the photos were taken, and these were the last known images, as I said, of 𝗙lie. And then around 8:30, they stopped at a barbecue restaurant. The phone stopped at a barbecue restaurant. They assumed the whole party was there, and then finally arriving back home at the apartment. And Wright said he had no doubts that 𝗙lie made it from Yellowstone back to the apartment. It's what happened afterwards that's in question. He said that at 9:43 p.m., the phone leaves his apartment, goes to Maverick gas station for 10 minutes, and then back to Lori's apartment, then back to Alex's. So the phone's doing a lot of jumping. He then went over the data points that showed the moving around Lori's apartment by Alex. Now, that's very scary in a way that they can track you that closely, but for a case like this, it's helpful, of course. He said that he observed all activity on Alex's device for the entire month of September. He said he was often in Lori's apartment from 8 at night till midnight, and then the device would go to Alex's apartment. So it's almost as if he was guarding her. That's my opinion, not the agent's. He would stay there until morning or sometimes late as noon. The only time he ever went, they observed him go to his own apartment was between the hours of midnight and 6 a.m. So he was essentially just sleeping in his apartment and doing nothing else. And then the next slide is a map of the apartment complex. And then there were other data points on Alex's phone taken in the wee hours of the morning on September 9th. And then later in the day at 9 a.m. on September 9th, the cell phone begins to travel north to Chad Daybell's house. It was about 8 miles north of the apartment, and arrives at the Daybell property at 9:15 a.m. And the numerous data points were recorded for the next half hour around the Daybell property. So by 11:45, the phone leaves Daybell's property and returns to Rexburg, stopping at Del Taco for 10 minutes because cutting people up and burying them makes you hungry. Again, I use cynicism and sarcasm to deal. And then there were 4 more major data points shown, approximately from the pet cemetery to the shed and back again, all along the Chad Daybell property. Now, these were sent in approximate 20 to 30 minute increments, so it doesn't put together his exact footsteps, but it shows where he was on the property. He then confirms that the back gate does allow a vehicle to drive onto the back part of the property, so there was no need for them to walk anything from the road to the property. And then around the time that Alex's phone leaves the property, we see the confirmation that Chad's raccoon text to Tammy is sent. So they were very careful. He basically ends it by saying that all of these things set up red flags for everybody. And then, of course, it was after that the warrant was obtained by the Rexburg Police Department, and the property was searched, and they did find the remains of Tylee Ryan around these specific data points. Next, they talk about Alex's device movement on September 22nd, the last time JJ was seen alive. He said that Alex went back and forth between Lori and his apartment between 4:29 p.m. and midnight. It says it doesn't move from his apartment between 12:11 a.m. and 9:41 a.m. on September 23rd. At 9:41, the device travels from the apartments to Chad Daybell's home, where it arrives at the Daybell property at 9:55 a.m. By 10:12 a.m., Alex device departs the residence back to Rexburg and goes to Lori's apartment by 10:22. It stays there until 11:14 a.m. The 2 data points of record while the device on this particular day, September 23rd, were found near the pond on Chad's property between 9:55 and 10:02, and other data points were recorded at the house's front door. So then they point out, we see where we're going with this, but they point out on Google Earth that Alex's data points were recorded on Chad's property near the pond, and that it was JJ's remains found where those data points recorded. Then he goes on to say that Alex's phone was at or near the Daybell residences 4 times in September of 2019, September 6th, September 9th, September 23rd, September 25th. It is noted that the phone was pinged at Dan's window tinting in Rexburg on September 23rd for 5 minutes, and he visited the store twice on September 25th. And now we're moving over to the attempted shooting of Brandon Boudreaux in Chandler, Arizona. They used the image of the Jeep that was used, and it was tinted to the same records that they were able to pull from Dan's window tinting. He said they did search the vehicle after it was seized. 2 receipts were found inside. One was a Mexican restaurant on October 1st, 2019 at 1:12 p.m. The shooting of Brandon Boudreaux took place in Chandler on October 2nd. The other receipt was from a Chick-fil-A in Amon on October 18th at 8:05 p.m. Tammy Daybell died the night of October 18th and into October 19th, and the receipt date was significant to law enforcement. So a receipt in that Jeep that was used in the shooting of Brandon Boudreaux, or the attempted shooting of Brandon Boudreaux, was in the area of the Daybell property on the night that Tammy died. That's what they're trying to establish here. That Jeep was there. Potentially Alex was there. Put 2 and 2 together. Then jump around to some more receipts saying that on September 25th, Alex visited a Walmart in Idaho Falls and bought a cell phone with cash at around 7 p.m. His other cell phone shows he was in the vicinity of Walmart at this time. And then Wright says on October 8th, Alex visited the Walmart in Rexburg from 3:01 to 3:37 p.m. After Alex and Lori abandoned their Rexburg apartments, the property managers found 2 cell phones in Alex's unit. The phones were turned over to the police. Wright learned that the phones were the ones purchased at the Walmart stores on September 25th. Blake then attempts to enter all of these receipts, particularly the ones from the Walmart cell phone, into evidence. Thomas objects. It is overruled. And then we go back to the device tracking. It says on September 30th, Alex's device is at Lori's apartment, and on October 1st and 2nd, it stays in Alex's apartment the entire time. October 3rd, it's back in Lori's apartment since September, the first time since September 30th. Other data points from Alex's phone were Unified Sportsman's Gun Club in Rexburg on September 3rd, Walmart, and then there was a visit to the gun range on September 26th and 27th. The device was also at the gun range on September 28th for almost 3 hours. On October 7th, Alex visited multiple gun ranges. According to the data points, he also went to 2 gun ranges on October 8th. So they're setting up that Alex was, I guess, perfecting his aim. He also spent time at the gun range on October 12th and on October 15th. And he also moved around to Walmart, spying things, a lot of movement. Now, of course, this could just be living his life, but, you know, whatever. October was the last time that Alex's device was on a gun range. And then we moved to October 9th, where Alex visited the Sportsman's Warehouse in Amon, Idaho. He said that day that this was the only receipt that was a cash purchase, and there were 5 items on the receipt, including rain pants, which were found later in Alex's apartment. And there was also a ski mask, soft drink, and gloves. Very suspicious, like that masked man that was at Tammy Daybell's home. Then there was search data tied to the Homer J. Maximus Gmail account on October 9th for frog tog sizing for pants. So all of this is leading up to, I think we know. After he leaves the store, he travels north to the vicinity of Chad's house. He doesn't stop, but drives by and continues on to US Highway 20. The driver turns around, drives past Daybell's home again for returning to Alex's apartment until 5:16 p.m. The device remains in his apartment until the next day. And then a map is shown on the big screen. Wright uses a laser pointer to show the spots where the data points were recorded by Alex's phone on the evening of October 9th. And then the evening of the shooting, he is pinged at the canal behind Chad's house. So all this is very suspect. And then they go back to talking about the cell phones and why those were so significant. And at this point, we break for lunch. After lunch, Wood and Blake and Wright, sum up the times that Alex's phone was around the Daybell residence in October, and that was October 9th, 15th, and 18th. So the date of Tammy's shooting, another random time, and the evening of her death. So there are no further questions. John Thomas will cross-exam. Of course, he asks him about his professional educational background. He goes over all that again. He asks about his question of 𝗬𝗏𝗀𝗏, and he said that he sat in on an interview that Ian had with Rexburg Police in December of 2019. He then asks him some random questions about how the data points were collected. He goes over all that again. He says he was in conjunction with Officer Balance that has already been on the witness stand, and that it's all pretty accurate. Then he asks him about the phone associated with Alex being at Chad's house on September 23rd, and basically asks this question: based on your training, your experience, and your knowledge working with the FBI, that's not enough time to dig a hole, dig a grave, chop up roots around the graves, find stones. 17 minutes is not enough time to do all that. Wright says he was there when JJ was found, and he believes it would have taken a lot more time than 17 minutes. So he's trying to show that the pings that he was at the Daybell property were not enough for him to do what he needed to do with JJ. Thomas said he has no further questions and tenders the witness. Blake does come back in with some redirect questions. Blake asks for clarification on cell activity and data points. Then she says, you were also asked if 17 minutes was enough time to dig that grave. In your opinion, would 17 minutes be enough time for one person to dig that grave? He said it would be hard for one person to dig the grave. But then Blake asks if it's possible that more than one person was involved. He says yes, and reminds everyone that 17 minutes is the time the device was there, not necessarily the time to dig the gravesite. Blake has nothing further. And so what Blake is saying is Chad was a grave digger. If he and Alex worked together, it might have only taken 17 minutes. Swish, 3 points. Next witness called after a short sidebar is Dr. Eric Christensen, who is the chief medical examiner for the state of Utah. Now, this is the coroner that did the autopsy on Tammy Daybell's body. He says they go over his background in forensic pathology. Remember, they are MDs. They are pathologists, and they like to look at dead people. And think of Scully on the X-Files. That's what she was. She was a pathologist. And then they asked him about his educational background and how many years he's been doing autopsies. And he says he has been doing autopsies many years and has performed around 7,200 autopsies in his entire career. He goes over the procedure for an autopsy in the state of Utah. And then they specifically turn to Tammy Daybell's autopsy. He says his office was contacted in November of 2019 by Fremont County Sheriff in Idaho with the questions about exhuming a body and having an autopsy done. He said he was there when Tammy was exhumed and her body was loaded into a vehicle. He went to his office and was there when the body arrived. He says it's routine for him or someone in his office to attend an exhumation to make sure nothing is damaged and no shenanigans are going on. He said he obtained Tammy's medical records before she was exhumed, and he said he's done a dozen or two exhumation autopsies. He said they're not as common as you would think. And so Blake asks if it makes a body more difficult to autopsy if they're exhumed. Christian says that most of the time the deceased person has been embalmed, so it makes tissue stiffer, but it also helps preserve the organs and the tissues in the state that they were in when the person died. Christensen says Tammy's casket was dry, and so there was no leakage or anything that could further contaminate. And then he asked Christensen to describe how the autopsy was done. He describes how the entire body is checked over, fluids are taken, body parts are examined, and everything is recorded. Again, think X-Files, how Scully would talk into a microphone with everything, the move that she made. He said he also examined the body for bruises, cuts, scrapes, and in his medical opinion, Tammy died of asphyxiation, and her manner of death had to be a homicide because there was nothing in her medical records or exam that would show her body would go into an oxygenous state naturally. He also said there was no history of seizures and her brain was totally normal. So that story about that Chad told about her having seizures was not entirely the truth. Are we surprised? He also goes through the ways that people can be asphyxiated, suffocation, neck compression, anything that impairs their ability to breathe normally. He says when somebody stops breathing, they lose consciousness, but their heart may continue to beat for a time, and then they will eventually expire. He says that they looked for pesticides and other potential drugs in Tammy Daybell's system. There was nothing in her system that played a role in her death. He said there were bruises on Tammy's arms that happened in the hours around the time of her death. He said they are consistent with someone being restrained and would be consistent that this was a smothering. He then goes on to talk about how she had no history of heart issues or anything that would cause this type of accidental death or, natural death. He said he tested for all sorts of intoxicants. He says that they tested for illicit drugs, alcohol, cyanide, heavy metals, and nothing was found. And he said they did a lot more testing than they normally would because of the facts around this case. He said that the liver was what was tested for those substances, and even though it had been embalmed, that liver samples were sent to be tested, and basically there was nothing in her system. The only thing was the obvious asphyxiation, and then her arms, which were obviously held down. Blake then asked if Tammy's organs appeared normal. Christian said for the most part, yes, but there was fluid in the lungs and a frothy, dry foam in her airways. And they show a picture of the pink foam on Tammy's face. The pink foam, he said, is a manifestation of pulmonary edema. He said he has conducted other autopsies where this foam has been present. He said it's often seen in things like heart failure, drownings, or anything that can cause a pulmonary interruption. And he goes, whatever caused the pulmonary edema would be the cause of death. And he says this played a part in him determining that asphyxia was the cause of death. They then enter all these pictures into evidence. And then they show pictures of Tammy's body. He points out all the bruises. They point out the pink foam again, and he explains the steps he went through to determine what caused her death. There is a bruise on her upper left chest that they are shown for quite a few minutes. He says that with all these images together, it looks like she was held down, in his professional opinion. The rest of the time is taken up with him going over various pictures and talking about how when a person dies, the blood pools at their back or at the point on which they're lying, and that's the reason that she had what appeared to be bruises on her back. And this testimony goes on for another couple of hours, and then court is adjourned for the day. So he will be back on the stand today, Tuesday, day 20, and as soon as I have that recording and those notes, I will bring this to you. And until next time, 𝗙𝗂𝗀𝗃.